Welcome to another wonderful Marjorie Evans audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Marjorie Evans, contemporary Christian romance author. Now find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. Italian Valentine's Surprise. Chapter 1. Chocolate hazelnut gelato melted on Brittany's tongue as she followed her family down the street in Rome, Italy. She could tell that her brother James was starting to get annoyed with how slowly Grandma was moving. He gave a little sigh now and then as he hefted his 3-year-old daughter higher up on his shoulders. Brittany took another spoonful of gelato and couldn't help but admire how easily Grandma was walking despite her age. Her hair might be white, but her steps were agile. Yet it wasn't Grandma's freedom of motion that Brittany found so enviable. It was her enthusiasm. Grandma stared at everything she saw with wide-eyed joy, slowing down to take in all of the sights and sounds of the city. Brittany wished she could gaze at the ancient sculptures and bustling streets with the same awe. They had been in Rome for 2 days, and she was starting to get accustomed to its strange mixture of old and new. It was as if time had passed through other cities but decided to make this one its home, and was switching with bipolar suddenness between ancient stateliness and a bella vita that was spectacularly modern day. Lifting her eyes from Grandma's excited face, Brittany scanned the skyline. A small billboard near her was splashed with color. An advertisement for a ballet splurged across its face in bold neon, but just behind it, the elegant curves of an old church rose from the chaos of roofs and lampposts. "Look, everyone!" Dad raised an arm to point. "Diresse de Parroquia Gran Madre di Dio." His American tongue slipped and struggled on the unfamiliar words. "It looks ancient, but it's actually less than 100 years old." He raised his travel brochure and gave it a little flourish. "Fascinating," muttered Brittany. James shot her a warning look. "When was it built, Dad?" he asked, gently prying his expensive sunglasses out of his toddler's grubby fists. "In 1931. Dad shook his head. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Brittany tipped up her gelato cup, swallowing the last few drips. The one thing she couldn't get used to about this place was the sheer amount of noise. Inner-city Rome was a far cry from Wisconsin's suburbia. There were just so many people here. Brittany and her family were rubbing shoulders with the surging crowd that filled the sidewalk, and the streets seemed to be edge to edge with gleaming metal as car horns blared and engines revved up and down. Everyone seemed to be talking at once, gesticulating with great enthusiasm, a sea of emotion that deafened Brittany's ears. "Did you hear about it, Brittany?" asked Hope. Jolted out of her reverie, Brittany looked over at her younger sister. Hope clutched her fiancé's hand, her eyes wide and intent. Hear about what?" asked Brittany, feeling disconnected. "About the bridge." Hope pointed toward the massive old stone bridge to their right. Brittany gave it a quick glance. Something about it being built like 2,000 years ago? Almost 2,000 years ago. Mom shot her an annoyed glance over her glasses, wordlessly chiding her for not listening. Dad stepped in. "Yes, in 109 AD. 200 years later, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge took place here. The parade of the chopped-off head, so to speak. Constantine I threw his rival Maxentius into the river, and later pulled his body out of the water, decapitated it, and paraded the head around Rome." "That's disgusting, Dad," said Brittany, but she couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. Mom moved close. "Brittany, are you all right? You seem quite sour today, and yesterday for that matter." Worry creased her forehead. "The rest of the family has been looking forward to this trip for months. Please don't spoil it for all of us just because you're still sulking over that dreadful boy." Brittany felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes. "I'm not sulking over him." Then why have you been so moody ever since we got here? Brittany tried to control her frustration. I didn't really want to come to Rome right now. You know that. I know. And it wasn't really your choice, was it? This vacation is to celebrate your father's retirement and our 30th anniversary. Please get on board, Brittany. I'm trying. And I'm happy for him. And for you. Then what is the problem? We're all hungry, Hope interrupted, stepping up to Mom and laying a hand on her arm. Maybe we should stop at a restaurant. It's making us pretty cranky. I'm not cranky, Mom replied, still eyeing Brittany. I'm just not happy that your sister is bent on ruining the day. I'm not trying to ruin the day, said Brittany with a sigh. Or was she? She didn't even know anymore. Her emotions were a tangled mess that she couldn't seem to make sense of. If it's not that boy, then what is it? Asked Mom. Brittany swallowed against the tears that were filling her eyes. I just didn't want to spend Valentine's Day in Italy. Alone. Mom paused and touched Brittany's shoulder. You're not alone, honey. We're all here together. You know what I mean. Yes, I'm afraid I do. Valentine's Day is the worst time to be alone. Brittany's voice broke. I don't want to lecture you, dear, said Mom. But for you, it's a new boyfriend every 6 months. Like clockwork. So many changes. That's not how love works. Mom's words rang true, which was even more frustrating. I don't want to switch guys ever half year. I don't. I really try. Well, whatever you're trying, it's clearly not working. Brittany took a deep breath. I need coffee, she said, not able to stay there a minute longer. I'll meet up with you later. They made arrangements for a meeting spot, and Brittany turned on her heel, looking around. Maybe a bit of time alone was all she needed. She hardly wanted to spoil everyone's vacation. Somewhere she'd seen one of those little coffee bars that seemed to be all over the streets of Rome. Her eyes rested on a squat little building hidden on a street corner, squashed between a vintage shop and a little market. Café Alfonsi, the wooden sign above the door read. The bar's stone facade was partially covered with the thick green leaves of a creeper that draped itself along the walls. Brittany dodged between antique metal tables, their white tops glinting in the cool wintry sun. Inside, the bar was warm with dark wood. Booths lined one wall, with small tables scattered across the rest of the tiled floor. A massive old oak counter sealed off the eating area from what looked like a tiny kitchen that Brittany could barely glimpse in the back. A handful of people, mingled tourists and Italians, sat at the tables sipping coffee. She headed for one of the booths and sank down in it with a sigh. The quietness inside the bar was both surprising and refreshing after the busy streets. Brittany could feel herself starting to relax as she gazed around, taking in the gentle classical music filtering through the speakers, just loud enough that she couldn't quite make out the words of the conversations around her. For several days in the large hotel suite with her entire family, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Hope and her fiancé, and James with his wife and 2 small children, the peace was heavenly. Buongiorno. The gentle Italian voice made Brittany look up. An old woman stood beside her, her wrinkles lifting as she smiled. She wore a neat black uniform and carried an armful of leather-bound menus, but she didn't have a name tag. Americano? Yes, said Brittany, smiling. Does it show? The woman laughed. See. How can I help you? Her round accent ebbed and flowed with an unfamiliar nuance around the words. I need coffee, moaned Brittany. If Grandma wasn't going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, one of James's kids was crying, and if that wasn't the case, then Dad was snoring. And Brittany knew that she still had jet lag. She planted her elbow on the table and pushed her fingers into her hair, giving the woman a pleading look. I'm hoping that the best thing about Italy so far is going to be your cappuccinos. The woman gave a round, warm laugh. See, they are good. Take a look at our menu. I'll be right back. She slid a menu in front of Brittany and bustled off. Brittany gave the menu a quick glance. She'd read that cappuccinos were considered to be breakfast drinks here, but it could have been 3 in the afternoon for all she cared. She needed one. Or maybe a plain old Americano would make her feel more at home, not that she really even knew what that felt like anymore. She groaned, rubbing her temples, feeling the effects of jet lag. Looks like you need an espresso, honey. The smell of Grandma's perfume enveloped Brittany, and she felt the booth cushions sink underneath her as Grandma slid in beside her. I don't think a cappuccino is going to cut it this time. Brittany raised her head, shaking her brown hair back out of her face. Sorry, Grandma. I know you've been enjoying your day. I really didn't mean to mess it up. Not at all. Grandma smiled warmly, her blue eyes sparkling behind her little glasses. She glanced around. Look at this gem you've brought us into. A productive little escape, I should think. Brittany laughed. You always find the bright side of everything. Grandma grinned. God has blessed me with more days than I deserve, so I try to appreciate every single one. I wish I had the same knack that you do. Brittany sighed, resting her chin up on her hand. Sometimes it feels like I'm just blundering from one kind of unhappiness to the other. Grandma put her head to one side. How so? Well, I just keep trying to get it right and it always fails. Brittany shrugged. Doesn't matter what it is, jobs, boyfriends, whatever. I never seem to be able to just pick the right thing, you know? I'm only a few years out of school and look at everything that I've tried. Straightening up, Brittany ticked off the items on her fingers. Photography, journalism, art. I even went to school for accounting for a semester and spent almost 6 months working as an au pair in Australia. But nothing's worked. And it doesn't help that Mom and Dad are so disappointed in me. What makes you think that? Well, it's not hard to understand. Hope's got her own hair salon and she's already engaged to Brent, and Mom and Dad absolutely love him. James is a doctor and married with 2 kids. Brittany threw up her hands and gave a rueful laugh. And then there's me, a washout who never succeeds at anything. Not even at keeping a boyfriend. Grandma smiled. I wonder if you're measuring success in the right units, Brittany. Brittany frowned. Grandma sat back, folding her hands in her lap. What does success mean to you? Brittany had no wish to become all philosophical, but she loved her grandma and didn't want to disappoint her. It's not about material things, I know, she said. But I would like to be able to hold down a job. Find a little love somewhere. Grandma leaned over and rested her hand on Brittany's. There's love everywhere, Brittany. Just look around you. Look what the Lord has done for all of us. Her smile widened, deepening her wrinkles. Maybe it's time you stopped chasing after happiness and opened your eyes to see the moment you're in. Brittany sighed. Her grandma was right, of course she was. But sometimes knowing what was right and living it out was a bit hard to do. Thanks, Grandma. I'll think on it. Chapter 2. Tell me more about what happened with Andrew, Grandma said. Brittany took another long sip of her cappuccino. The combined effects of the atmosphere in the bar and her grandmother's soothing words were beginning to steady her, but the mention of Andrew's name sent a hot stab of pain through her heart. It was going so well, she said, shaking her head. Then he had to go and ruin it. It seemed that way, said Grandma. You two had gone out for a while. Brittany snorted. If you can count 8 months as a while. It was the longest I've ever dated someone, but she sighed. I knew it was coming. I should have known it was all too good to be true. He seemed like a good man, said Grandma. He was. He treated me so well. Brittany shook her head. Grandma prompted gently. When he proposed, Brittany sighed. I mean, Grandma, how do you know? How do you really know that the person you're with is the one that you want to spend the rest of your life with? She leaned forward. How do you know that the job you're studying for is the career you want to invest so many years of your life in? I don't get it. I don't get how you. How is everything? The sound of the deep voice rolled over Brittany's soul the way that this morning's gelato had slid over her tongue, both strong and sweet, with a lilt that was uniquely Italian. Brittany looked up into a pair of eyes so large and dark that they seemed to contain the entire galaxy. They were thickly framed by dark lashes, set in a smooth-skinned face with a square jaw dusted by stubble. A dark fringe curled on either temple, creating a combined effect that made Brittany suddenly and immediately lose all semblance of coordination. She stopped mid-rant, lowered her hands, and promptly slammed the edge of one hand straight into her coffee cup. Teetered for a heart-stopping moment before crashing down onto its side. Hot coffee flooded the mahogany table, splashing on the booth and ending up mostly in Brittany's lap. "Oh dear," commented Grandma. Brittany squealed, jumping to her feet. The dark-eyed stranger was already yanking a cloth out of his belt and slapping it down onto the table, catching the rest of the mess in one graceful movement. Brittany's cheeks reddened as she scrambled back. "Gosh, I'm so sorry," she gasped. A stream of Italian burst from the young man's mouth as he mopped up the table. "No, no, per niente." He shot her a smile that made every cell in her body explode. "My mistake. I startled you. Come." With a little flourish, he finished mopping up the worst of the coffee and straightened. "I'll show you to the bathroom so you can clean yourself up." Brittany looked down at her white jeans and stifled a groan. There was coffee all over her legs. "I'll join her," said Grandma. "I don't think she has the presence of mind to go anywhere alone at this point." A note of amusement bubbled under her words, and Brittany shot her a death glare. The young man didn't seem to notice. He led them briskly round the back, apologizing all the way. "These cups, they tip over so easily," he said. "Just a tap and Cianto." Over they go. Brittany could tell he was trying to put her at ease, but it only made her feel more flustered. Goodness, but he was gorgeous. But right then, her legs were burning. She mumbled a thank you as he held the bathroom door open for her, and she fled into the blissful privacy, Grandma hot on her heels. "That was so embarrassing," Brittany whimpered as soon as the door had closed. She spotted a roll of paper towel and yanked a length out of the dispenser, dampening them quickly and making a sad attempt to dab the coffee from her jeans. "Did you see that?" "I certainly saw him," said Grandma happily. "A magnificent specimen, I thought." "Grandma," squawked Brittany. "What?" Brittany trailed off. "Old. I was going to say religious." Grandma chuckled, grabbing some paper towels and holding them out to Brittany. "Valentine's Day makes me think of how the Lord created and sanctified romantic love. Some of the greatest love stories I've ever read are in the Bible." She gave a mischievous grin. "And there's nothing amiss with admiring the Lord's creation, especially since your Grandpa Bill's been gone for almost a decade now." Sadness leaked into her smile. 47 years of marriage, it was more than most of us ever get. "How did you do it, Grandma?" Brittany chucked the fistful of paper towel into a bin. 47 years. "How did you know that Grandpa was the right one for you?" "I just knew," said Grandma simply. "And God's grace brought us through." "I'm not helping anything, am I?" said Brittany, staring down at her jeans. "Nope, they're a goner until we can get to a washing machine," said Grandma. "Don't worry, love. We'll catch a taxi back to the hotel once we've paid our bill and you can change." They stepped back out of the bathroom and headed for their table. To Brittany's surprise, there was no sign of even a drop of spilled coffee anywhere anymore. Instead, a brand new cup of cappuccino stood in the place of the one she'd knocked over, full to the brim. Beside it, the young man stood with a smile. his hands folded neatly in front of him. "I thought you could enjoy a refill before you go," he said. "As soon as you are ready, I'll go outside and hail a taxi for you if that is what you would like." Brittany stared at him, suddenly unable to utter a word. Grandma came to her rescue. "Thank you, young man," she said. "You're too kind. No, no. Anything for two beautiful customers." The young man ducked his head. "Let me know if you need anything more." "A name would be nice," said Grandma, grinning. "Grandma," hissed Brittany. The young man gave a graceful little bow. "Stefano Alfonsi, at your service." "Alfonsi? So does your family own this bar?" "Actually, Gloria a Dio, I do." Stefano inclined his head with a little smile. "I trust you will be back soon." "We will," Brittany blurted out. Grandma and Stefano both stared at her, and she felt herself blush. "I mean," she said more quietly, trying to steady herself, "I'm sure we will. It's close to our hotel and the coffee is good." "Grazie." Stefano smiled. "Let me know if you need anything else." He headed off, grinning and chatting to other customers as he made his way toward the kitchen. "He was nice," said Brittany as nonchalantly as she could, scooting back onto the booth and taking a sip of her new cappuccino. "See," said Grandma, laughing. "Nice." Stefano tried not to watch the brunette American girl leave, but his eye was drawn to her as she and her grandmother headed out of his bar. The gentleness with which she held the door open for the old lady, her pure and musical laugh, it drew him in a way that he couldn't explain. He shook his head, forcing himself to concentrate on the coffee he was making. There was no time for staring. There was no time for anything. Sophia bustled up past the counter, heading toward the kitchen with a tray of dirty cups. She paused by Stefano and gave him a broad smile. "A pretty little Americana, don't you think?" she said, giving him a little nudge. "Sophia," said Stefano. "It's not right to objectify women." Sophia laughed. "Of course not, but I saw the way you looked at her. And not just the way she looks, but the way she speaks. The way she laughs." Stefano paused, trying to push the image of the girl out of his mind. "We don't have time for such things," he said. "The Valentine's Day party is only a week away and there is still so much to do. The bar is nowhere near ready yet. I still have not found a decorator." "Stefano." Sophia sighed, reaching out to pat his arm. "All you ever do is work. I know I'm only the help, but I must speak out." "But I love my work," said Stefano. He gazed around his beloved bar, his eye resting fondly on every table and customer, every wall and window. "I love this place. You know that, Sophia. And you're more than the help. But there is more than work to love. I see how lonely you are." She squeezed his arm, then bustled off. "There's no time for that," he called after her. She paused and looked back at him, her eyes suddenly serious. "Life is short, Piccolino. There is no time to not have time for these things." Then she headed into the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind her. Stefano shook his head, turning back to the coffee. "Mio Dio, I know what she means," he whispered. She was right, he was lonely. A lump gathered in his throat, but he resolutely swallowed it down, placing the cup on a tray and lifting it to take it to the table. He walked to the waiting customer with a smile firmly planted on his face. Chapter 3. The bar was bustling. Despite the cold, gray day outside, Stefano could feel sweat on his brow as he hurried from tables to counter and back, checking on customers, making coffee, running back again, trying to spare Sophia's old limbs some of the workload by serving the outside tables. It was only 9 in the morning, but he felt like he'd already been on his feet all day. "Ma dai, Stefano," gasped Sophia, mopping at her brow as she passed the counter. "Do we really need the extra business of the Valentine's Day party?" "Not really," admitted Stefano, not looking up as he finished off a coffee. It's just, he paused, resting his hands on the counter and gave Sophia a frank look. Papa never missed a single year. Sophia gave him a sympathetic smile, resting a hand on his shoulder. I know. She glanced toward the door and smiled. Here comes your pretty lady. Stefano glanced up. The American brunette from a few days ago had just come into the bar, but there was something different about her today. The first time he'd seen her, she had seemed exasperated with something, although there was gentleness and respect in all of her interactions with her grandmother. In the past few days, they'd been at the bar almost every day, and he had watched as she laughed and chatted with the older lady or sat reading a book by herself. Today, though, he could sense frustration in her posture as she moved toward one of the bigger tables. And he could quickly see why. She was accompanied not only by her grandmother, but by a group of people that had to be her family, judging by the resemblance. Sophia nudged him and pushed an armful of menus across the counter at him. Here, you serve them. Before he could protest, she had grabbed the coffee he'd just finished and hurried off to serve it. Stefano took the menus and made his way between the tables toward the American family. He ran a quick eye over them, easily assessing them as he had done with groups of tourists ever since he was a boy. Mom and Dad, probably retired, then the grandmother and 3 adult children, 2 of them with company, 1 with kids. The brunette girl was the only one who seemed to be there alone. He swiftly distributed the menus, enjoying the art of serving people almost without allowing them to notice his presence. He came and went like a breeze, so much so that they hardly ever saw him to express a thank you. The brunette girl, however, spotted him quickly. Her friendly green eyes rested on him, and his heart skipped a beat. Buongiorno, she said, and her accent wasn't bad. He laughed. Your Italian is getting better, he said quietly, placing a menu in front of her. Thanks. She gave him a smile that made his stomach turn a cartwheel. The usual for you, I assume, signorina? Yes, thank you. I don't know what the others want. She gave her family a slightly hopeless glance. The mother looked up, fixing the girl with a frown. This is our first time here, she said in a clipped voice. We will need some time to look at the menus. Stefano felt guilty. I'm sorry, signora. I will be back in a few minutes. He withdrew as quietly as he could, aware that the brunette girl's eyes were following him. As he hurried on about his tasks, Stefano kept half an eye on the family. 2 kids ran around between the tables, giggling and enjoying themselves. He tried his best to shepherd them out of mischief's way, but he could see Sophia was enjoying them. The others were in deep conversation, consulting cell phones and travel brochures as they talked. Only the brunette didn't seem keen on joining in. She fiddled with an earring as she listened to the conversation. Can I take your order? Said Stefano, standing at her elbow. She jumped, her distant eyes quickly focusing on him. You've got mine. 5 espressos and 2 milkshakes for the kids, please, said her father. And for you, my dear? The brunette girl's mother gave Stefano a dismissive flick of her hand. A latte for me. Mi scusi, signora, said Stefano. Do you mean with milk? She frowned. Yes, of course. Forgive me, signora. Stefano gave her an elegant little bow and a winning smile that managed to melt her icy facade a little. I am well acquainted with Americans, but many signorina owners in Rome will bring you a glass of milk if you ask for a latte. We call it cafe latte or latte macchiato here. He smiled again. Oh. She managed a small smile. Thank you. Only a pleasure. Stefano beamed good-naturedly. I shall place your order in a moment. As Stefano walked away, placed their order, and then started clearing the booth nearby, he couldn't help but hear them resume their conversation. Oh, I've wanted to see the Colosseum all my life, the brother was saying excitedly. I loved the scenes there from Gladiator. It would be wonderful to see the Sistine Chapel, the youngest of the 2 sisters chipped in, laying her head on her fiancé's shoulder. That has to be one of the most amazing works of art in the entire world. I will be visiting the Forum, said the mother. Where would you like to go, Mom? Asked the father. The grandmother chuckled. My dear, every inch of this city is lovely. Of course, I wouldn't mind seeing St. Peter's Basilica, but I'll fit in with all of you. She turned to the brunette. What would you like to see, Brittany? Questions seemed to catch the girl off guard. She straightened, dropping her hands to her lap. Sorry, what? Why even ask her, Anna? Said the mother. You know she doesn't want to be here in the first place. I don't think she has any plans. Well, Rose, I don't think it can do any harm, said Grandma. So, Brittany, have you got anything you would like to see? Brittany glanced at her mother, then said, I'm open. We can do whatever everyone likes. Come on, Britt. The sister put her hand on Brittany's. Tell us, what would you like? Well, I read about this one place that seemed pretty cool. Brittany shrugged. It's called Trastevere, I think. Supposed to be a fun neighborhood, lots of restaurants and all kinds of historical buildings, too. Just seems like a nice way to spend the day. Trastevere. The mother shook her head. That's not exactly close to the Forum and the Colosseum, is it? As for the restaurants, they're everywhere in Italy. Brittany sighed. I just thought it could be fun. Stefano felt like he had to do something. Crossing the space between them swiftly, he took up his place just behind Brittany. Trastevere is magnifico, he said. There is much to see. I know the area well. The mother glanced up from her travel brochure. Is it? How nice. But I think we're going in a different direction. Won't you send out a croissant for me? Brittany looked up at him and shook her head. Thank you, Stefano. But I guess another day. The mother laid the brochures on the table. I suppose we don't have to always stay together. It's all right, Mom. I'm not sure I want to go wandering off all by myself, said Brittany. Stefano felt his heart pounding at the intensity in Brittany's eyes. He took a deep breath, and the words poured out of him before he really knew what they were. You don't need to go by yourself. The entire family looked up at him. Stefano was as shocked by his words as they were. I live not far from Trastevere, he said, gesturing with an arm that was draped with a white dish towel. If you want to see it, I can take you there one afternoon when the bar is less busy. Brittany blinked up at him. Do you mean it? Si, of course, Signorina. I would be happy to show you around. I have not been to Trastevere myself for some time, which is terrible considering how nearby it is. I mean, Trastevere is not terrible, of course. The fact that I do not go there more often is terrible. He smiled, clutching desperately for his usual ease. What was it about this girl that turned him into such a fumbling fool? I don't know, said Brittany, glancing reluctantly at her mother. I would be most happy to show you part of my wonderful city, Stefano reassured her. Are you sure? I mean, it's most kind of you, but Brittany began. Go, honey. Grandma squeezed Brittany's arm. What's stopping you? Why not take a day and enjoy it? She gave her granddaughter a gigantic wink. And you'd be in good company. Grandma! If you're sure it won't be any trouble, said Brittany's father, clearly assessing him. No, not at all, signore. Stefano grinned. I would be honored. And I shall return her safely to you. Brittany was blushing. Thank you so much, she said, smiling shyly. Or should I say grazie? When are you free? Asked Grandma. Stefano smiled at the old lady's enthusiasm. This afternoon, if it pleases you all, he said. That's perfect. Brittany burst out. She smiled. I can't wait. I will meet you at your hotel, said Stefano. We can walk there. It will be a lovely stroll. Thank you, Stefano. That would be perfect. She wrote the hotel address on a napkin and handed it to him. The family was all smiling as Stefano went back to the counter. He was a little lightheaded, not fully sure what he had just committed himself to. Had he really just convinced the pretty Americana to spend an entire afternoon with him? Maybe he could start to get to know the girl who had captured his attention the moment she'd walked through his bar door. I hear you have plans for this afternoon, Stefano. Stefano looked up. Sophia was grinning at him like a cat that's got the cream. Plans with the pretty Americana girl, she added, her grin widening. Stefano straightened up, pulling his dignity together. There is no need for that grin, Sophia, he said. I merely offered to escort the young woman on a tour of Trastevere. Of course, said Sophia, slapping his shoulder lightly with a dishcloth. And every time she walks in, you don't spend most of your time staring at her like she is the only creature in the world. Sophia laughed and put her arms around him, hugging his waist tightly. It was as high as she could easily reach. I am happy to see that you are doing something other than work, she said, giving him a fond smile. Sometimes I don't think you're really Italiano. I will lock up the bar today. You can get away early. It is a big job, Sophia. Well, I won't be putting the chairs on the tables. But leave the rest to me. It's about time you had a life outside of this place, said Sophia. Now come, let's get this morning rush tended to. You have a lovely young woman to spend the afternoon with, whether anything comes of it or not. And you will enjoy it and not worry about anything, capire? Capire, laughed Stefano. As you wish, Sophia. You're the boss. You'd better know it, grinned Sophia. Chapter 4. Brittany was alone in her hotel room as she finished the last touches of her makeup. Her heart was thundering so hard that it made her hands tremble as she applied her mascara, almost poking herself in the eye. She paused and drew a long breath, glaring at herself in the mirror. Get it together, Brittany, she ordered herself. It's just a tour. It's not even a date. Even though the man you're going with is beautiful, smart, kind, caring, and… She paused, sighing, her hands falling to her sides. And you felt your heart flip when you first saw him in a way that you've never felt before. She laid a hand on her heart and swallowed, trying to steady herself. It's no big deal. The words brought an instant flashback. Valentine's Day the year before. When she'd eagerly pulled open a glittery red envelope, opened the card, and felt the shock and joy as 2 tickets to a concert with her favorite band fell out onto her lap. Oh, Andrew, she cried. I can't believe it. You must have bought these months ago. I've been hiding them for 4 months. Andrew grinned, his brown eyes sparkling. It hasn't been easy, but I just had to make the day special for you. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. I love you, baby. His strong arms encircled her. I love you too. Brittany lowered her head, placing her hands on the sink to support herself. Tears were welling up behind her eyes. How had things gone so far south so quickly? It was at that very same concert, just as she was having the time of her life, that Andrew had taken a knee and asked her to marry him. And she'd said no, despite the wonderful evening that they were having together. Because of all the evenings they'd had before that had sometimes not gone well, the times they'd been angry or tired or upset or just cranky because they were hungry. They'd had so many imperfect times. How could she know that things weren't going to get worse if she committed to spending an entire lifetime with him? Sighed, a horn blared, and Brittany almost jumped out of her skin. She hurried to look out of the window, wondering what was going on outside. Judging by the harshness of the horn, she more than half expected to hear yelling as some scene of road rage unfolded on the street below, but instead all seemed completely peaceful. Traffic flowed easily by. Parked up on the pavement outside the hotel was a little silver Italian car. and the elegant figure standing beside it could only be Stefano. When he spotted her peering down from her window, he raised a hand in a languid greeting. Brittany could see his huge smile even from her hotel room. She ducked back out of sight, her heart thundering. Placing her hand over her chest, she took a few deep breaths, hoping that perhaps that would steady it. "You can do this, Brittany," she told herself out loud. "Be cool." She rushed back to the dresser, grabbed her handbag, threw an extra fistful of emergency tissues in it, just in case there was another cappuccino-related mishap, and gave herself one last glance in the mirror. Her tight jeans were tucked into long boots, perfect for walking in this wintry weather. Her knitted gray tunic looked tasteful against her wavy brunette hair. So she hoped anyway. She took another deep breath and ran down the stairs. Stefano was still waiting, leaning against his car as Brittany ran outside. It was a shock to see him in something that wasn't his bar uniform. She'd expected the standard jeans and checkered shirt that she was used to seeing on the guys back home. Instead, Stefano was casual but immaculate. He wore snow-white chinos that looked like they'd just been ironed, over black shoes that flashed in the sun. His cream turtleneck sweater hugged his muscular form, and his black hair was neatly styled. He would have looked like he'd stepped straight from the pages of a fashion magazine if it weren't for the genuine warmth of his smile, flashing beneath his stylish sunglasses. "Buon pomeriggio," Stefano called to her. "Are you ready for Trastevere?" Brittany realized she was staring. Trying to cover up her blush, she hurried over to him, knowing she didn't look even 1/10 as stylish as he did. "Yeah, I totally am," she blurted out before she could think. "You sound like a schoolgirl," she chided herself. Yes. I'm excited." "Sounds fantastic," she stammered on. Stefano's smile only widened. "I'm glad to hear it. What do you want to see first?" Brittany was honest, she had no idea. Apart from the single paragraph in the travel brochure, she didn't know anything about the neighborhood. She'd meant to read up a little this afternoon so that she didn't sound like a total idiot, but it had taken too long to get her hair, makeup, and outfit just right. She stammered. "Why don't you give me, a tour from a local's perspective?" Stefano laughed. "There's much ground to cover. You're sure you don't have anything in particular in mind?" "Nah, it's okay. Why don't you take me to your favorite place?" Stefano gave a surprised laugh, and Brittany flushed. He stepped back to open the passenger door of his little car. "As you wish, signorina," he said. "But first, the Ordo Botanico. You will love it." "The what now?" asked Brittany, sliding into the seat. Stefano walked around and got into the driver's seat before responding. "A botanical garden," he said. "But trust me, it is something special." "If you say so," said Brittany. "I've never, oh." Her squeal of shock was cut off short as Stefano flung the car directly into the traffic. Grabbing instinctively for the dashboard, for the handle by the window, for anything, Brittany was thrown into the complete bedlam that she had only witnessed from the street or the metro train before. She had seen New York traffic before, but compared to this, it was nothing. It was not so much busy as it was simply chaotic. There seemed to be absolutely no concept of right-of-way. Whoever was brave enough to go first simply went. Stefano's car jumped from lane to lane, brakes screaming as other cars darted in front of them, his engine roaring as he accelerated into a tiny gap that seemed too small to accommodate a scooter, let alone a car. Brittany would have screamed if she'd had the breath. Instead, white-knuckled, she clung to her seatbelt in abject terror as they bounced and careened through the chaos of Rome. Finally, on a bridge over the Tiber, the car screeched to a halt. The traffic had ground to a halt, defying the cacophony of horns that appeared to have little purpose other than to vent the driver's frustration. Brittany glanced at her reflection in the car window. She looked completely frazzled. Her face was pale with fright, her hair practically standing on end, some of her makeup a little smudged after her frantic grab for the seatbelt. Stefano, on the other hand, seemed completely unruffled. He lounged in the driver's seat, one hand loosely draping the steering wheel, the other resting along the window with careless grace. "Sorry about the traffic," he said. "It's always worse on the bridges." With an effort, Brittany unclenched her jaw. "You mean it's usually like this?" "Oh, this is nothing," said Stefano. "Wait for rush hour." Brittany made a brief personal vow never to travel anywhere in Rome near rush hour. "Great," she muttered. Stefano glanced over at her, concern furrowing his smooth brow. "Brittany, are you okay?" He reached over, his fingertips tentatively brushing her shoulder. His touch electrified her. It felt as though every cell he'd been in contact with was suddenly radioactive. "I'm fine," she laughed. "I just didn't know driving in Rome was so, death-defying." Stefano visibly relaxed. "So, it's not like this in your hometown?" She laughed again. "Hardly. And here we've been mostly walking. We were told that driving was best left to the locals." Stefano threw back his head and laughed, enjoying the moment. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have warned you." His smile turned apologetic. "I've served many tourists but always forget their reactions. Mi scusi. The traffic just seems natural to me." His obvious delight set Brittany at ease. She gave a nervous giggle. "I don't think I could do this to work and back every day," she said. "My heart wouldn't be able to take it." Stefano shrugged. "I'm used to it," he said. "Here we go, it's moving again." Brittany gritted her teeth for the next 20 minutes as they careened through the traffic. She relaxed only slightly as the scenery flitted past. They were now bursting through streets lined with ugly modern buildings, then glass shop fronts filled with the latest fashion were on either side, and suddenly they would be winding back down an old Roman avenue surrounded by ancient buildings and stately monuments. At last, the car squealed to a halt in a parking spot that Brittany didn't even see until Stefano was already almost upon it. She put out a hand to catch herself on the dashboard as they bumped to a halt. "Here we are," said Stefano, still looking as smooth and unflustered as if he'd just stepped out of the shower. "The Ordo Botanico." Chapter 5. Brittany stepped out of the car and gasped. The thick, overcrowded bustle of the city was gone. Suddenly, she was standing in a paradise of plants and flowers. The gates of the Ordo Botanico were ornate, and even outside the gates, plants grew in an abundant green profusion that was magically refreshing after days spent in the inner city. Cedars towered above her, muffling the sound of the traffic. Her boots crunched on white stones as they walked toward the metal gates. There were so many plants that Brittany didn't know where to look. Some were spiky cacti, others lush palm trees, still others creepers draped along the pillars of the gates. "Wow," Brittany breathed. "I had no idea this was even here." "A lot of people don't." Stefano smiled. "Come on. This is only the entrance. Let me take you inside." They paid for entrance and then entered the garden, and Brittany's breath was immediately taken away once again. The white path extended in front of them, opening up into a circle that enclosed a beautiful little fountain, its water feature spraying high into the air as a collection of stone cherubs draped themselves around its base. Enormous palm trees stood like sentries all around, and beyond them, Brittany could see an expanse of lawn running off into more trees in every direction. It was like she had suddenly and magically stepped into the heart of summer. The finishing touch was the white path they were standing on, which wound away among the lawns, leading enticingly deeper into the garden. "This is amazing," Brittany said. "I've never seen anything like it." "There are more than 3,000 plant species here," said Stefano. "Let me show you around." Brittany looked up at him with a grin. "Do you know all of them?" He laughed. "No, not quite. But enough, signorina, that I dare say I can entertain you for a few hours." "Then lead the way, signore," said Brittany. "Gladly." Stefano inclined his head. We'll follow the path and I'll show you everything that I know. The garden was huge, bigger than most gardens back home. It stretched in all directions, and the further they wandered inside, the further away the sounds of the traffic became. Instead, they found themselves embraced, enveloped in the magical peace of green and growing things. They wandered through an entire valley of ferns that carpeted the ground in thick and luxurious profusion, a Japanese garden, peaceful for all its strangeness. They strolled between the towering pillars of mighty trees that reared their heads above the surrounding city with a timeless majesty that could not be matched even by the most magnificent of cathedrals. Brittany was aware, as they walked beneath the huge trees, that her mouth was hanging open, but she realized that she didn't care. It was all too magical for her to want to hold on to any type of decorum. Stefano had been pointing out the plant species to her as they walked. Great desert spoon, a spiky green plant that seemed impervious to all that surrounded it, cockspur coral tree, oriental sweet gum. The names were as foreign to Brittany as the plants, but she loved hearing about them, not so much because of them but because of the passion in Stefano's voice. Now, he gazed up at the tall trees with something different in his eyes. This was a quieter fondness, yet something about his tone was tinged with sorrow. Cedrus deodara, he said, staring around him. The Himalayan cedar. Indians worship it as a divine tree. I believe it is only as divine as everything that mio Dio made, yet there's always been something special for me here. He sighed. How do you know the gardens so well, anyway? Brittany asked gently. Mio Papa used to bring me here all the time. Sadness tugged at Stefano's smile. Most of the time he was busy in the bar, but at least once a week after closing, he would bring Mia, Sorella, and me to the garden to play. We used to spend hours on the lawns and under the trees, building forts and playing games. Sounds like you have a great dad, said Brittany. Stefano looked down at her, his eyes deep and soulful. Had, he said. Brittany stared into his eyes. They were the most incredible color she'd ever seen. She felt like she could wander into them, get lost in them, read the secrets of the stars in them, and find there whatever it was that was leaving such a gaping void in the center of her heart. She wanted to ask why they were now so filled with sadness, but she couldn't find the words. Stefano blinked, breaking the spell. He turned away, smiling at her to follow. Come on, he said. Let me show you the bamboo. It is quite something to see. You think that He paused, his brow furrowing elegantly. A bear? Black and white. He closed his hands into two circles and held them over his eyes like patches. Very fluffy. A panda bear, guessed Brittany. Really? We call it a panda in Italian, too. Stefano shrugged. We don't have the panda, but we have enough bamboo for them. Anyway, come on. After touring the bamboo stands, Stefano led Brittany back toward the car. They paused at a little ice cream stand to get cups of chocolate gelato, then headed out of the gates, talking and laughing. Brittany realized she was giggling like a schoolgirl as she spooned her gelato, but she couldn't stop. Plants, the city, this man, it was all far too enchanting. Where to next? She asked, throwing her gelato cup in a bin and sliding into the passenger seat. The Gianicolo, said Stefano. Or, to English speakers, Janiculum Hill. Is that one of the 7 hills of Rome? Asked Brittany. No, not quite. Stefano laughed. It's actually outside the bounds of the ancient city, but it still has much history behind it. Some would call it the 8th hill of Rome. Oh. Brittany blushed. I guess that's what I get for trying to sound clever. You like good views? Asked Stefano. I'm sure enjoying this one, Brittany thought, looking into his dark eyes. Why, yeah, she managed. Feels like I haven't seen further than a city block for days. Then you will love this. Ready for the mayhem? Stefano asked, his eyes sparkling. Brittany gripped her seatbelt and the car handle and gave him a look of mock determination. As ready as I'll ever be. As the bird flies, it is less than a mile from here. Stefano shrugged. We could walk there in 15 minutes, or we could drive there in 10. It is your choice. The car will be safe enough here, although the parking is quite expensive. Let's drive, said Brittany. It's a novelty not to be jostled by other tourists. I'll take the risk, thanks. Stefano grinned. You are in safe hands. He started the car. Here we go. The car roared back into the traffic, and Brittany tried to sit back and enjoy the chaos. The route Stefano took made absolutely no sense to her. First, they shot most of the way back up the street by which they'd come, then over the Tiber again in a hooting mass of traffic, then winding through the streets outside of Trastevere, Stefano applying his horn and waving a hand outside of the window as he shouted in a stream of Italian. None of it seemed particularly angry, but it most certainly was highly opinionated. Back over the Tiber they went, crawling again through bumper-to-bumper traffic, then back down almost the way they came. Brittany guessed they couldn't be more than a block from the street they'd taken. Finally, just as she thought they were almost there, the road took a strange wiggle that made her stomach wobble a little. The last, Stefano drove the car almost all the way around a traffic circle and they screeched to a halt. There, he said, pleased with himself. You do not look anywhere near as green as last time. You are learning, Signorina. Please. Brittany laughed. It's Brittany. And I might look like a complete sissy, but I've done slightly crazier stuff than this. They stepped out of the car and into the balmy winter sun. It was starting to sink in the afternoon sky. Brittany guessed they must have spent more than 2 hours in the botanical garden. Such as? Stefano prompted. Brittany thought about this for a while. Well, the craziest thing I've ever done was probably the skydiving, she said. Although a missions trip to Morocco was also pretty high up on the list. Skydiving? Stefano raised his eyebrows, a bemused quirk to the corner of his mouth. What? Said Brittany. Think I don't look like the type? Stefano laughed. I have underestimated you, Signorina. They started to stroll away from the car. Brittany was too busy gazing at him to take in any of her surroundings. How about you? Said Brittany. Are you the crazy type? Do I look like the crazy type? I don't know, said Brittany. I've never met a crazy Italian before. Stefano threw back his head and laughed, a shameless guffaw that made several of the tourists around them stare, but none of the locals took any notice. Fair enough, he said. And to answer your question, no. I have hardly ever even been outside of Rome. I have never actually left the borders of Italy. Really? See, my family has been running the bar for generations. I always knew that I wanted to be its owner someday, although mio padre encouraged me to go to university or travel for a while first. He wanted me to be sure, even though I knew that I was. Stefano's smile took on that sadness again. So did you? Asked Brittany. No. I was only 6 months out of school when I started managing the bar, with Sophia's help, of course. Why not? Brittany tried to make her tone gentle, feeling a sensitivity in Stefano that she hadn't come across in him before. To her shock, tears welled up in Stefano's eyes. He blinked them back, looking away from her. Mio padre died shortly after I graduated from high school, he said. In his will, he left the bar to me. Mia Sorella was already married and living in Nantes with a home and a job. He left me a private note to say that if I wanted to sell the bar, it was well within my rights. Stefano shook his head. But I grew up there. I knew that Dio wanted me to take over where mio padre had left off. I wish I could hear God's voice so clearly, Brittany murmured. I'm sorry to hear about your dad. It can't have been easy to lose him when you were that young and then have to step into his shoes. It wasn't, but at least I had Sophia. She's worked at the bar forever, I think. She's like family. Stefano laughed. I don't know what I would do without her. She seems to be the very mortar in the walls. Brittany couldn't take her eyes from him. So you'd never leave the bar, then? No, 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 not in 100 years. That place is my calling and my home in this world. It might be just a little coffee shop, but I have seen mio Dio at work there. Stefano grinned. I love it. Brittany's heart was a little heavy as they continued up the hill. She kept her eyes fixed on her boots, watching them move along the pavement. She had been hoping for what exactly? That she and Stefano had a chance to be a couple? She shook her head to herself. She couldn't even make it work with the boys back home. Her day out with this beautiful, kind, funny man was going to be just that, a day out and nothing more. Here we are. Stefano touched her shoulder. The Gianicolo. Brittany looked up. The first thing that struck her was the towering monument on her right. Raised upon a sturdy pedestal, a metal warhorse stood to attention, the curves of its body so lifelike and its attitude so intent that Brittany half expected it to quiver in readiness for the charge. On its back, an armored warrior gazed into the distance, his expression as serious as it was strong. Giuseppe Garibaldi, Stefano explained. A hero of the Italian Wars of Independence in the 19th century. Then she saw the view. With a gasp, she hurried to the edge of the terrace, resting her hands on the wall to gaze out over the magnificence of one of the oldest cities in the world. Pillared buildings stretched onward for miles upon miles, cathedrals rising from among them like rocks from an ocean of architecture. Brittany could see spires and towers, trees and basilicas, and the snow-dusted backdrop of the mountains in the distance behind. Whoa! She gasped. That is incredible. The best view of Rome in all the city. Stefano leaned on the wall beside her. My city. He smiled. I cannot imagine being anywhere else. This is where I belong. Brittany wished she knew where she belonged. Yet, looking at Stefano, admiring the gentle curve of his lip against the smooth, straight line of his jaw, she felt that perhaps she was starting to learn. You seem so sure, she said. I am sure. I always have been. I wish I could be. Brittany looked over at him, allowing the breeze to push her hair back from her face. It's just never been that easy for me. Why not? Stefano fixed his eyes on her. I don't know. I've just always been a drifter of sorts, Brittany shrugged. I was a wild teenager, and although I grew out of the wildness, I still feel like I never really found my place in the world. She wondered why she was confiding all this to a man who was basically a stranger, yet it felt so natural, so easy, so safe. My parents wanted me to go to university, so I tried for a couple of years. I wanted to be like my brother James, he's a doctor. So I studied to be a nurse, but it never worked out. Just too much, I don't know. The emotional toll of it. When my sister Hope went to try hairdressing, I decided to go and learn makeup. She shrugged. That didn't seem to suit me either. Stefano nodded, and his expression was encouraging and full of understanding. Ever since, I've been bouncing from one course or job to another. I tried setting up my own photography business, a spectacular failure. I worked odd jobs as a receptionist or something here and there. Nothing ever stuck. So what are you doing now? Searching. Brittany groaned. I had a job working in a pet store, which was pretty cool, but I just got laid off from that as well. The store wasn't showing enough profit and they had to downsize. I'm sorry to hear that. I did like that job, but I'm not sure it's my passion, you know. I love to hear you talk about your bar. It's your passion. Just be patient, Signorina. Stefano smiled and touched her shoulder again. Mio Dio has a plan for you, I'm sure. It's easy for you to say. You've always known. See, said Stefano, unruffled. But just because my journey looks different to yours does not mean that Dio is not also in charge of it. Brittany thought about his words for a few moments. They sounded like something Grandma would say. You're probably right, she said. But come on. Enough seriousness. I'm on holiday, right? She grinned. Show me what else you've got. Chapter 6. The basilica was a message, Brittany gushed. I've never seen anything like it before. The floors were so shiny you could use them as mirrors. And that ceiling. It looked like it was almost glowing. Grandma grinned, taking another sip of her espresso. So are you, my dear, she said. It seems like you had a wonderful day yesterday. I totally did, Grams. Brittany beamed. It was one of the best times I've ever had. She sighed in contentment. And how about you? How was the Colosseum? Glorious, said Grandma. To think that those things have all been standing for so many centuries. Why, the Colosseum was built less than 40 years after the crucifixion. Her eyes misted over with a distant look that Brittany could never quite decipher. Paul the Apostle himself wrote one of his most passionate epistles to members of the church right here in Rome. Oh, said Brittany. Of course, darling. Haven't you read the book of Romans? Brittany paused. I never thought of it that way, she admitted. But of course. That makes sense. For in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. Grandma smiled dreamily. It was in this city that some of the Bible's most epic promises were read for the very first time. Brittany thought about it, stirring her cappuccino absent-mindedly as she gazed around the bar. Buongiorno. Have you beautiful ladies all that you need? Asked Stefano, who suddenly appeared beside them. Brittany jumped, looking up. Dapper as ever in his bar uniform, Stefano stood smiling at her elbow. She felt herself tremble a little at his closeness. We're good, thanks, she said. My granddaughter had a wonderful day with you, young man, said Grandma. I really appreciate you showing her around. Stefano looked at Brittany as he spoke. It is I who must thank her, Signora. I don't get out of the bar enough. Sometimes my world can feel very small. But yesterday made my sky feel wide open again. He gave a graceful bow. Let me know if you need anything. Brittany watched him walk away, his back ramrod straight, shoulders square underneath his black uniform. The bar was cool and quiet this time of morning. Brittany's family was sleeping in after a long day of touring yesterday, and she and Grandma were almost the only customers in the shop. It was a drowsy Saturday morning in Rome, and time felt like it was standing still. Stefano, however, seemed as busy as ever. He had gone to the front of the shop to retrieve a large cardboard box, which he carried over to the counter with as much care and grace as if it was filled with golden thread. Instead, when he split the top with a craft knife and gently opened the box, ribbon spilled out, yards and yards of ribbon, colored in stripes of hot pink and lime green, almost 6 inches thick and glittering satin, tumbling all over the counter and onto the floor. Oh, goodness, said Grandma, fondly watching him. What do you think that's for? Asked Brittany. Heaven only knows. But the colors have seared themselves onto my eyeballs. Possibly permanently. Brittany watched in amusement as Stefano pulled out a length of ribbon and gave it a little flourish. He stared at it with intense focus, holding it up against the surroundings of the bar. Turning this way and that, he seemed to be trying to see where it would fit best. Brittany realized her jaw was hanging open. The muted colors and quaint atmosphere of the bar were elegant, sophisticated, quintessentially Italian. But that ribbon... It's ghastly, she whispered. Isn't it just? Asked Grandma, sounding thoroughly entertained. Sophia emerged from the kitchen as Stefano was experimentally draping the ribbon along the counter. She did a startled double take, then spoke in urgent Italian. Stefano hesitated, responding uncertainly, and Sophia slapped her palm to her face in spectacular dismay. A stream of horrified Italian emanated from her. Stefano dropped his hands to his sides, crestfallen, and gazed down at the ribbon. He uttered a small, pleading sentence, and Sophia bustled over, shaking her head violently. She grabbed the ribbon and started stuffing it back into the box, talking rapidly. Stefano gesticulated, but it was obvious he was rapidly losing the argument. At last, his shoulders slumped and he gave Sophia a pathetic look. She patted his shoulder but slammed the box shut on the ribbon. Looking dismayed, Stefano wandered over to where Brittany and Grandma Saturday. "It seems I've been voted down," he said, taking their finished coffee cups. "Sophia has never had much regard for my decorating skills." "Well, they're not very," Brittany began. Grandma stomped on her toe under the table. "Getting ready for a special occasion?" she asked. "El giorno di San Valentino," said Stefano. "Valentine's Day. We always have a party here every year. It was one of mio padre's favorite times of the year. Normally, I just open the bar and have plenty of cake and finger food or a cheese fondue, but I wanted to make it special this year with some decorations." His mouth turned down at the corners. "Sadly, my arancini di riso may be the best in Rome according to Sophia, but I am not very good at decorating." "But your bar's decor is so wonderful," said Brittany. "It's really very tasteful. I love it." "See, it is." Stefano smiled. "That was Mia Madre. She was an artist and was brilliant with this kind of thing, and neither mio padre nor I ever had the heart to want to change it after she passed on." "She was a very talented lady," said Grandma, putting her hand on his arm. "See, she and me padre were a perfect combination. He cared for our customers' palates and she cared for their eyes." He sighed. "Alas, I did not inherit her knack, only his." "I could help you," said Brittany. Stefano's eyes widened. "You could?" Brittany's heart was thundering at the prospect of spending more time with Stefano. "Of course I could," she said. "I used to do all the decorating at parties in high school and everyone liked my work. Except Patsy Jones, of course, but that was her own problem." "Brit is excellent," Grandma chimed in. "She's always done her own room in hopes, too. She picks up a style quickly. She'll get this place looking wonderful for your party." "If you're sure," said Stefano. "I would appreciate the help, but I don't want to steal your holiday." "It would be my pleasure," said Brittany with a grin. Stefano hesitated for a moment, his eyes soulfully searching hers. Then his features relaxed into a smile. "I would truly appreciate it," he said. "I want this party to be a great success, not just for the bar, but for mio padre. He always loved these parties." "I'm here to help," said Brittany enthusiastically. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow morning?" asked Stefano. "Absolutely. I'll be here bright and early." 7 o'clock? Stefano quirked a cheeky eyebrow. Brittany was surprised to find that she was excited to hear the early hour. Every moment with Stefano had become something precious to her. She nodded, grinning. "Okay. 7 o'clock it is. I look forward to it." Stefano's voice was warm and smooth, melted chocolate. "As do I," Brittany responded softly. Yet as Brittany and Grandma left the bar, she couldn't help but wonder what exactly she thought she was doing. She was falling for Stefano faster than she'd ever fallen in love with anyone before, but she also knew that in a few short days she would be leaving Rome for good. And then what? Still, she couldn't help but realize one indisputable fact. She couldn't wait for tomorrow. Chapter 7. Stefano hadn't expected that Brittany would actually be there as early as she'd promised, but when 7 o'clock came, she was standing outside the closed bar in her high heels and tight skirt, peering through the window, her eyes widened by makeup. Stefano stood by the counter for a long minute, watching with a half smile on his face, as she tried to peek into the shop to see if anyone was inside. She was so doe-like, her long legs moving gracefully as she moved from one window to the other, her huge eyes alert and attentive. Yet it wasn't just her beauty that drew him to her so irresistibly. There was something about her spirit, her gentleness. "Mio Dio, what are you doing?" he murmured to himself. "You know she has to go back to America. How can you allow my heart to fall so hard and fast?" Are you going to leave that young girl out there in the cold? Sophia called from the kitchen, her voice scolding. Or are you going to be a gentleman and let her in at some point? Scusa, scusa, Stefano said over his shoulder as he hurried toward the door. I was just busy. See, busy staring, Sophia teased. Stefano shook his head at her as he hurried to pull the door open. Brittany straightened up from the window, a blush blooming prettily in each cheek like a blossoming rose. Morning, she said, her American twang still a little strange to his ears. I didn't know if you were here yet or not. We've been here for almost an hour, said Stefano with a smile. Come in, per favore. It is cold outside. Thanks. Brittany came inside, towing a bright silver suitcase on wheels. Stefano closed the door and she peeled her coat off, hanging it over the nearest chair. So, where do we start? She asked. I'm not sure, Stefano admitted helplessly. I have no idea what you want to do with the decorating. And I see you brought supplies. I will pay for those, of course. Brittany grinned and patted her suitcase. I did a little shopping yesterday. Let's see what we can do. Let me help you with that. Stefano lifted the suitcase onto the counter, and Brittany briskly unzipped it. To Stefano's surprise, there were no hearts in the suitcase, let alone anything even remotely pink. He gave her a nervous glance. She laughed at his expression. You're in Rome, silly, she said. You can't decorate your bar like you're expecting a bunch of kindergartners. You want to go for romantic. She plucked a line of fairy lights out of the suitcase and gave them an excited little shake. Now, you carry on with whatever you're doing and leave this to the professional. Okay, if you say so. Stefano laughed, raising his hands. I'm just going to be over here checking the coffee stocks. You do your thing. You betcha I will. Brittany slung the fairy lights around her neck and twirled a little, gazing at the room. I love doing this. Now let's see. How are we going to make this whole bar just scream candlelit dinner? Stefano busied himself behind the counter. So, did you go to a lot of Valentine's Day parties in America? He asked. Oh, every year, said Brittany. My first Valentine love was in 7th grade. His name was Peter, and he made me a pink card out of construction paper. It was really cute. I forgot about him after a few days, of course, like most 7th graders do. She strung the fairy lights up over the doorway and looked at them with a critical eye. Nope. She shook her head, grabbed the lights down, and headed toward the booths. Stefano decided it was best not to question whatever she was doing. And this Valentine's Day? He probed gently. Any special plans? Your party, obviously, said Brittany lightly. Do you think these lights look okay over the booth? Sembrano perfetti. I think they look perfect, said Stefano, meaning it. I am glad I got a professional in for this job. Don't tease, said Brittany. I've always liked this kind of thing, but that doesn't mean I'm actually any good. She laughed. And you? Had any interesting Valentines recently? Not really. Stefano half smiled, watching as Brittany tastefully put up the lights. I have always been too busy for that kind of thing, Capire. I had a few sweethearts in high school, but nothing very serious. Little more than Valentines, to be honest with you. Although we do not exchange Valentines quite the same as you do in America. Here, we feel that the holiday is only for romantic lovers. Children seldom take part in making cards. That's different, said Brittany. I mean that you don't do Valentine's Day with as much enthusiasm as we do. I thought it kinda originated in Italy. And didn't Romeo and Juliet live here too? Aren't you Italians supposed to be, like, super romantic? Maybe we are, said Stefano, but it is something I never seem to have gotten around to. Where are you going to put those? Brittany had pulled some long white candles out of her suitcase. Everywhere, she said happily, hugging them to her chest. Just absolutely everywhere. She grinned up at him, her happiness glowing in her eyes, and Stefano's heart turned a slow somersault. He felt in that moment that he would do absolutely anything to get that smile out of her again and again, and that he would give the world for that smile, to see that joy in her face. He gazed into her eyes, drinking in her bounce, her joy, her eagerness to help, the beauty that shone from her so brightly and simply when she smiled. No amount of makeup could ever have replaced the expression she was wearing now. The moment stretched on, seeming to last an age. Finally, he blinked, breaking the spell. "Can I give you some coffee in exchange for your work?" he asked. Brittany gave herself a little shake. "That would be appreciated," she said. "I can't wait to get this all up and see how it looks. I'm just trying out the look today, of course. We'll decorate properly in a few days, the night before the party." She giggled. "Trust me, Stefano Alfonsi. When Valentine's Day comes, you're going to have the best party that this bar of yours has ever seen." Watching her dance from one side of the room to the other, covered in candles and lights and flowers, Stefano felt that it had already been the best Valentine's Day of his life. And it hadn't even started yet. Chapter 8. There was nothing more romantic than Italian music, Brittany thought as she closed her eyes and allowed the sound of it to wash over her. It was smooth, tasteful, filled with crooning passion that penetrated into her soul even though she couldn't understand a word, and just loud enough that it was easily audible. But the loudest sound in the bar was certainly the voices. Low chatter filled the room to the rafters, a hubbub of happy conversation from the guests that filled the entire bar from wall to wall. Opening her eyes, Brittany stared out at the packed room. All the tables were filled, both small and large. 2 or 3 couples had squashed themselves in at the bigger tables, and even some families had made their way to be there on the traditional Valentine's Day party that the bar had been throwing there for decades. "Why are all these families here?" she asked. "I thought it was mostly couples that celebrate Valentine's Day here." "Because this day and place have great meaning for some families." Stefano's voice rang with passion and contentment. "Many of the parents of these little children met here in this very bar at a Valentine's Day party, or at least had their first dates here. Mio Padre often used to be approached by people who had met their wives or husbands here, and they would show him their bambini and tell him how important the bar had been in nurturing their love for one another." "That's amazing," said Brittany. "Just think about how many lives have been changed right here in this shop." She glanced around in admiration. "It's like love hangs in the air a little bit, don't you think?" "I do." Stefano laughed. "And I am the honored witness to all of this blooming love." She looked up into his eyes, loving the brightness and joy she saw there. Something about Stefano came alive when he talked about his shop, and Brittany was beginning to see why that was. There was something magical in the air, something that made her head spin a little, or maybe that was just the side effects of standing so close to him and the smell of his cologne. "Grazie for offering to help us today as well," said Stefano. "It is always a problem trying to find a waiter who will give up Valentine's Day evening to wait tables with us. But it is just too busy for Sophia and I to do it alone." "Of course," said Brittany. "There's nowhere I'd rather be tonight than right here." Stefano stared at her. Brittany found herself losing her thoughts somewhere in the depths of his lustrous eyes. Then she heard a chair scrape and instinctively looked away. The door opened and an elderly couple came into the bar, dressed to the nines. The woman wore a cascading red gown artfully cut for her still elegant curves, while the man was in a full suit and tie, a bright pink rose adorning his buttonhole. He pulled the chair out for her, albeit a little stiffly. Brittany grabbed a couple of menus. "Be right back," she said. "Luckily, I've done this before." Stefano laughed. "Seems you've done everything before." "Pretty much." She shot him a smile over her shoulder and headed quickly across to the old couple. "Buonasera. Capisci l'inglese?" She attempted as bravely as she could. The lady laughed in delight. See, we do. How are you tonight? I'm great, thanks, said Brittany honestly, placing their menus in front of them. And you? We could not be better. The lady laid her hand over the old man's arm and smiled at him, a warmth born of decades shining in her eyes. Brittany couldn't help but smile along with the elderly lady. Have a great time tonight, she said. I'll be right back to take your order. She moved quickly between the tables, her feet taking her instinctively toward the counter. Over the past few days, she'd come to know the bar like the back of her hand. Old habits from waiting tables as a teenager were taking over once more. As she walked, she subconsciously checked each table she passed for empty cups or dissatisfied expressions. Tonight, she was gratified to see that almost everyone looked happy. Even her entire family, seated in one of the booths, was talking and laughing. She suspected Grandma had persuaded them to come, but she was glad about it. Hope noticed that Brittany was looking their way and raised a hand. Hey, waitress! Come over here. Her tone was playful. Brittany hurried over. Anything I can help you with, Signorina? She asked, the word rolling more naturally off her tongue now. Hope laughed. I just wanted to congratulate you. She gripped Brittany's arm. This place looks amazing. You did a really fantastic job with the decor. Brittany looked around the bar. There were fairy lights strung around the edges of the room, which, together with the flickering candles, gave it a romantic ambience, while the dimmed overhead lights still made visibility easy. Flowers decorated each table, simply arranged in elegant glass vases. She had scattered a handful of rose petals around the center decoration of each table. The last minute, she was able to secure beautiful tablecloths of different colors and designs. Sculptures borrowed from a local art school through one of Sophia's connections were strategically placed on the counter and on pedestals near each window. As Brittany looked around, she noticed that some of the customers were pointing at them and talking eagerly to their companions. Thanks, said Brittany. It was really fun to do. You certainly have a knack for it, Brittany, said Mom. I must be honest, this is some of the best work I've ever seen from you of any type. Brittany searched her mother's eyes. There was real pride and happiness in them. Thanks, Mom, she said sincerely. Can I get any of you anything? It's pretty busy. This place is packed, James agreed. No, we're good, thanks. You'd better get busy. See ya. Brittany headed back into the kitchen, grabbing a tray off the counter as she went. Inside, Stefano was bent over a plate of finger food, delicately topping it with tiny flakes of Parmesan. Everything still okay out there? He asked, not looking up. Everything is perfect. Brittany grinned. The people look super happy. You've thrown a great party, Stefano. Her tone gentled. Your dad would be really proud of you. Stefano looked up, momentarily surprised. Grazie, he said softly. It is good to hear. Sophia bustled in, her tray piled high with dirty dishes. There you are, Signora. She paused by Brittany and gave her side a friendly little pinch. I have never seen this place so full of such contented people, she said. It looks bellissimo. They are all talking about how beautiful the decor is. And they all send their compliments to the chef, of course, she added, smiling over at Stefano. Brittany did a wonderful job, said Stefano. He straightened, lifting the tray easily on one hand, his movements as elegant as if the tray were made of air. Back into the fray, he joked and disappeared out into the main room. Brittany followed him, stopping by the counter, her tray tucked under her arm. She stood still, listening to the music and to the hum of conversation, and watched Stefano move from table to table. A real and genuine joy was bubbling up inside her, from somewhere deep in her soul. She took a slow breath and found herself doing something that she hadn't done since she broke off her engagement with Andrew. She was saying thank you. Dear Lord, thank you for all this. It wasn't much, but it made her whole soul flutter with joy. Then she saw the old couple looking around for a waiter, and she hurried off toward them. The evening stayed busy as the hours wore on. Any time a couple left, their place was immediately filled by another. Brittany's feet hurt from hurrying from table to table, but her heart was full. She ducked behind the kitchen door for a brief respite, peering through the little glass window at the tables. She could see that Sophia would be able to handle it alone now, for everyone there had been served. Her family was still there, and they looked like they were having an amazing time. She smiled, glad that she could bring them some joy for a change. The door opened, and Brittany jumped. Stefano stepped inside, giving a surprised laugh when he saw her. "I see you found my hiding place," he said. "Excuse me," said Brittany. "I always duck behind here for a little breather when things get very busy." Stefano grinned. "As I suspect you are doing." Brittany laughed. "There's no denying it. But it does seem to have quieted down a little now, don't you think?" she said. "Look at my family, Stefano. They're just enjoying it so much." "Thank you." She smiled up at him. No, I can't thank you enough. My bar looks amazing and everyone out there is having extra fun thanks to you." He looked down at her, the kitchen lights reflecting brightly in his deep, dark eyes. "You have done more than you know for me." Brittany's heart sped up at his smooth, warm voice. She swallowed, not really knowing where to look. Stefano turned toward the little window and looked out of it for a few seconds, a smile creeping over his features. "Look there," he said, putting a hand on Brittany's shoulder. She moved closer to him, her shoulder brushing his chest to see where he was pointing. It was the old couple. They had been here for hours. They didn't seem to be talking, they just sat together, holding hands and gazed around the room, both wearing smiles of deep contentment. Every now and then they would exchange a word and laugh. "They're adorable," said Brittany. "I am envious of them, to be honest," said Stefano. "Why?" "Look what they have, Brittany." He smiled. "They have everything that I truly want. They have each other. Look at the steadiness between them. Time has tested their love, and circumstances have likely thrown everything they have against them, but their love emerged stronger. I may live in the most romantic country in the world, but somehow I have missed it." He gestured toward the old couple. "I want that. Something fearless and lasting. Something hardworking and brave." Brittany gazed up at him, at the smooth line of his stubbled jaw, at the warmth in his eyes, and her heart too yearned for the love that he was speaking of. "I know exactly what you mean," she said softly. "I want the same thing." Stefano looked down at her, and she was suddenly and intensely aware of how close he was, of the warmth of his body against hers, of the sweetness of his smell. She wanted to say more, but suddenly she didn't have the breath. What she wanted to say was that now she knew in that moment that such a love was possible for her. When he leaned down, she was ready for him. Their lips met, and it felt as though every cell inside Brittany exploded in a brilliant jet of light and showered back over her like a fireworks display, lighting up every fiber of her being. She wrapped her arms around his neck and drew him closer, and his kiss grew more passionate, his hands resting lightly on her waist. She had kissed a lot of boys, and this kiss was hugely different. Never before had she felt so connected, so joined. Never before had she felt such peace mingling with her excitement. When his chest pressed against her, the thumping of his heart resonated through her. She felt his contentment, his strength, his gentleness, and it made Brittany's heart rejoice. When they pulled away, she was breathless. She stared at him, wordless, searching for a way to share what she was feeling. "Brittany!" The female voice sounded behind her. The voice was muffled, but she could hear shock ringing through it. Brittany looked over. Hope was standing just outside the glass window of the swinging door. Her eyes were wide, her mouth hanging open in surprise, and her expression brought Brittany suddenly and rudely back to earth. I have to go." She braced her hands against Stefano's chest, pushing him away. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I've got to go. I think Sophia can handle it now. Then, shoving the kitchen door open, pushing harshly past Hope, she ran, her feet pounding across the bar floor. People spun to watch as she fled. Her hand slammed into the outside door and it swung loudly open, but she kept going. She ran, her feet hammering on the pavement, not caring where she was going. What had she been thinking? Was she trying to have her heart broken again? She needed to get away from Stefano Alfonsi. Chapter 9. Brittany's feet throbbed. She sat on the wall of the footbridge, her sore feet swinging over the swift waters of the Tiber. The lights of Rome were reflected in the hurrying current, and a gallery of stars moved and flickered as the water flowed. "What's the matter with me?" she murmured out loud, her shoulders slumped, crinkling her borrowed waitress uniform. Everything had been going so well until she had seen Hope's face, seen her surprise and disapproval. Of course, Hope disapproved. Stefano lived in Italy, a world away from Brittany's home in the United States. Anything between them could only end in heartache. Brittany couldn't even hold down a regular relationship. She knew that doing the long-distance thing would be a disaster. Her love life in general had always been a complete disaster, and she knew it. So why did she allow herself to fall for such a sweet, good, gentle man? She didn't deserve him. And she'd never have him. "What were you thinking, Brittany Davis?" she muttered to herself. "Hard to tell," came a voice from behind her. "But bridges are such good places for contemplation, don't you think? They're a space between places, which is where we often are when we really need to think." Brittany looked up. Grandma strolled unhurriedly over, resplendent in her royal blue evening gown. To Brittany's surprise, and with only a little difficulty, Grandma hitched up her skirts and scrambled up onto the wall beside her. "There," she said contentedly, smoothing out her gown, its glittering fabric reflecting in the river below. "That's it." "Hey, Grandma," said Brittany. "Hey." Grandma placed her hands on the wall on either side of her and leaned back, gazing out over the city. "Beautiful at night, isn't it?" Brittany sighed. "I just want to get away from it, to be honest, Grams." Grandma sat in silence for a few moments. Brittany wallowed a little deeper into her thoughts. She knew they were flying back to the United States in 2 days, and it couldn't come soon enough. She'd just have to hide in the hotel until then so she wouldn't be tempted to seek out Stefano's bar. Then she could return to her silly, pointless, boring, safe life. "So," said Grandma, "do you know the story of St. Valentine?" Brittany looked up. "What?" "St. Valentine," Grandma repeated. "You know, the person that Valentine's Day is named after." "I can't say I do," said Brittany. "Well, Valentine was a young Roman physician during the time of Claudius II, said Grandma. In 3rd century Rome, Christianity was outlawed. The Christian couples were, by law, not allowed to get married, but this didn't stop the young Valentine. See, he was a Christian priest as well as a doctor, and he believed that everyone should have the right to make their wedding vows before the Lord. Oh. Brittany was only half listening, her heart still back at the bar. Valentine continued to help these couples to get married the way that God intended for them to be, said Grandma. But the inevitable happened. The Romans caught him and they found him guilty. Aha! Valentine was imprisoned for some time, where he met and fell in love with a prison guard's blind daughter. Though he was on death row, still the Lord granted him an experience of the kind of love that Valentine had been honoring by marrying those couples. Valentine's last letter was written to this young girl and signed, "Your loving Valentine." They were to become some of his last words. On February the 14th, 270 AD, Valentine was led outside of ancient Rome to a spot not very far from this bridge where we're sitting right now, and beheaded for his crimes against Roman law. He lived his life and gave it up for love. That's sweet, Grams, said Brittany. No, said Grandma. No, it isn't. Not really. She gripped Brittany's shoulder. It's horrible and tragic and brutal, but it's also fierce. Fearless. Courageous. Self-sacrificial. Grandma's bright blue eyes bored into Brittany's. It's a story about love, Britt. Real love, something gritty and ferocious. And that's what Valentine's Day is really about. We've lost it somewhere between the cards and the chocolates, but Valentine's Day didn't start with romance. It started with real love. And real love is not something you express in flowers. It's something you express in sweat and blood. Brittany stared at her. What do you mean? I mean that it's never perfect, Britt. If it's perfect, it isn't real. When you really love someone, you fight for them. Grandma's voice was as intense as her tone as she clutched Brittany's shoulder more tightly. You don't give them candy, you give them your best, you get in the arena for them, and you fight for them. Brittany stared at her. What do you mean? I mean that love isn't red hearts and cute messages. There's more to it than that. There is the love that lasts, Britt. The love that can be eternal. Her words rang straight into Brittany's soul. She closed her eyes, thinking of Stefano. He had never called her beautiful. He had never brought her gifts. Instead, he listened to her words. He noticed her achievements. He tried to bring her joy and safety. Suddenly, overwhelmingly, she knew why she was so attracted to him. It was not because he was handsome and Italian. It was because he loved her. Grams, said Brittany slowly, I think I've just made a horrible mistake. Grandma patted her back. I suggest that you unmake it then, my dear. Brittany jumped off the wall and ran. Her apron flapped against her legs, her feet slapping on the street with a pain that she joyously ignored as she ran. Her heart seemed to find an extra capacity it had never had before, her burning lungs ready for another breath and another as she pushed herself faster. The bar was only a block away now. Half a block. She put her head down, doubling her pace, determined to get there. Brittany! She skidded to a halt, and there he was. Stefano. Standing right in front of her, his eyes wide, his hands raised. There was a coffee stain down the front of his white apron and tears in his eyes. Stefano. Brittany's throat thickened until she could barely speak. She walked toward him, slowly, her hands fidgeting restlessly with her apron strings. Per favore. Let me speak. Stefano swallowed audibly. Please, I ask you to forgive me. I'm so sorry if I've offended you by kissing you. His face fell. It was the furthest thing from my intentions. I thought he didn't know what to say. You thought I loved you, Brittany whispered. Stefano hung his head. See? Brittany closed the distance between them in one long stride. I do, Stefano, she whispered. I do love you. I ran because I was scared of how much I love you. But I do. I love you and I want to be with you, and if that means that, I will sell the bar. Stefano's words came out in a rush. What? If I have to, I will sell the bar. I know it keeps me here. I will sell it and come with you. Brittany stared at him, her entire body trembling. Grandma had been right. This was love, this scary, huge, and courageous thing, a thing willing to sacrifice, to give its all. And it was what she felt, what she was determined to give him in return. Tears were pouring down her cheeks, but they were of joy. You don't have to, she said. Because I'm going to stay here. With you. She laughed through her tears. I want to love you like you love me, a love that's willing to do big and scary things. I've never done anything scary in my life, and I want to do this now. For you. For us. A single tear ran down Stefano's cheek. I love you, Brittany. I love you too. Then she kissed him. She kissed him like there was no one else in the world. Chapter 10. 6 months later. Stefano, mio tesoro. Brittany bounced through the bar door, her handbag swinging off her arm. She clutched at her summer hat as it threatened to blow off. I'm home. Where are you? Back here, cuor mio, Stefano's voice called from the kitchen. Brittany hurried toward him. There were only a few diners in the bar. They hardly looked up, used to Brittany's exuberant presence by now. Soft Italian music played over the speakers, accompanied by the gentle hum of the ceiling fans high above the tables. Stefano came out of the kitchen as Brittany reached the counter. She hopped up onto one of the bar stools and planted her handbag and hat on the counter. Hello, he said, leaning over to kiss her. She happily returned his kiss. Hi. Had a good day? It just got even better. Stefano flashed her another melting smile. The bar was a little quieter today, nice to have a break. And yours? It was bellissima, exclaimed Brittany, gesturing wildly. Stefano laughed. You're becoming very local, my darling. What's gotten you so excited? He slid a coffee across the table toward her. Brittany took a huge gulp. You know Signora Russo's pizzeria they asked me to redecorate a few months ago? Stefano nodded. See? Well, I popped by there today on my way back from that cute little restaurant that's just booked my services, and Signora Russo was absolutely over the moon. Brittany beamed. She said that her customers couldn't stop talking about how much they love the decor. She says that half of them asked if she'd extended the shop, it looks so much bigger. Brittany gave a little squeal of joy. And the best part is that she also says that her sales have gone up significantly. She's been able to catch up on all of her car payments. That is wonderful, amore mio, said Stefano. I know. Feels so good to make a difference in somebody's life. And by doing something I totally enjoy. Brittany sighed in contentment, propping her elbows up on the counter and resting her chin on her hands. If you told me 6 months ago that this was going to happen, I would never have believed you. Well, I am grateful to mio Dio that he has brought us together. Stefano laid his hand over hers, searching her eyes. You make my soul sing, beloved. And you mine. Brittany leaned over and kissed his cheek. Oh yes, and Grandma called. She says that she'll probably be flying over next week. She also says that she basically had to beat Mom and Dad away with a baseball bat to stop them coming, too. It'd be totally impractical for them to come over now, not with Hope's wedding being in only a month. But she says that we're still good to fly back together for a visit and to be there for Hope's wedding. Oh, and she says that they're proud of me, and Mom told her to tell me that she's sorry for ever doubting me. Again. Stefano laughed. Excellent news, mia polpetta. Right? It's so weird that my relationship with my family is so much better even though we now live thousands of miles apart. She frowned. Wait, did you just call me your little meatball? See, I did, said Stefano. Ick. It is a playful Italian term of endearment, said Stefano, smiling at her. It is a name that you only use for someone that you truly and deeply love. His eyes filled her world. She stared at him, suddenly captivated and breathless all over again. For a moment that made her heart sing, neither of them moved. Then Stefano walked around the counter to her side. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a little red box clutched between his fingers, and fell to one knee, opening the box at the same time in one smooth movement. Sapphire glittered, nestled on velvet and encased in silver. Brittany wanted to gasp, but she was utterly frozen, welded to her chair. Brittany Davis. Stefano's eyes danced. I love you more than words or actions can ever express, and I want to love you like this until the end of time. Will you marry me? Brittany let out a shriek that made every diner in the bar turn around. Oh, yes, Stefano. Yes, 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 of course I will marry you. She dived off the chair and half hugged, half tackled him, bringing both of them to the ground in a laughing, crying heap. Somewhere among the tangle of happy limbs, Stefano managed to wrestle the ring onto her finger and scrambled to his feet, pulling her up alongside him. Applause and laughter filled the bar as all of the diners rose to their feet, giving their love a standing ovation. I love you so much, Brittany gasped, clutching at Stefano, feeling dizzy and breathless. Stefano laughed, planting a tiny, delicate kiss on the top of her head. And I love you too, Brittany. She threw her arms around him, buried her face in his chest, and hung on like she would never let go. And she wouldn't. She knew there could be hard times ahead. There could be fights and failures, hopes dashed and dreams destroyed, times of love and happiness, times of fear and anger, times of sickness and heartache, times of need and plenty. And she was ready for all of it. She would fight through all of it. There was a love that now lived in her, and she was ready to let it flow. Forever. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Marjorie Evans. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Marjorie Evans, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Marjorie Evans romance.